With alive in this place. Let's sing this out. I was lost. I was lost with a broken heart. You picked me up, now I'm set apart. From the ash I am born again, forever safe in my Savior's hand. You are more than my words can say. I'll follow you, Lord, for all my days. Fix my eyes following your ways, forever free in an empty place. 'Cause you are our freedom. We lift you higher, your love, your love, your love. 1 Corinthians says that what Jesus did on the cross was considered foolishness into the eyes of those who didn't yet know him. But to the believers, it was the power of God. God did what was considered reckless in the eyes of the world to save his people, to save all of us. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. Leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, let's sing this out together. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. Yes, it did. And you have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. And you have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found. Leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's nothing you won't do. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
Amen. Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and say hi to 5 people. Tell them to give them a high five and tell them Happy Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day.
Bruce, I haven't got to you. Morning.
Again, we're so glad you guys are all here with us today. If you have served in the military or are currently enlisted in the military, will you go ahead and stand up, please? I just want to recognize we have quite a few in our church. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you guys for your service. I tell you what, I am so appreciative of you guys and men and women who serve in the military. This Memorial Day weekend, both of my grandfathers served in World War II, and I had the privilege of kind of doing some homework on both of them. I never got a chance to really know one of my grandfathers, but my other grandfather I didn't have a very good relationship with. But a couple years ago I did some research on their service in the military. It was just really cool. And now that they've passed away, obviously Memorial Day is the day that we honor those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for the freedom that we have here today. And so we're so privileged that we live in a country where we can worship God in the way that we want to, and there are men and women who have given their lives for that. And we also think that with Memorial Day that we're so grateful for the gift that Jesus gave us and has saved us and the freedom that we have in Christ, because death isn't the end. And I'm looking forward to seeing both my grandfathers again one day in heaven, because we know that although we're separated from those ones that we loved who are no longer with us, this is just a temporary thing. So we're excited to say that next weekend, June 3rd, is going to be our first weekend in our new location at the convention center. And again, our new time is 10 a.m. So it's kind of like daylight savings time all over again. So whatever you did this weekend, just do it an hour earlier next week and just pretend there's no time change, right? The reason why we're doing this, and I know we talked about this already, but I think it's worth going through again. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to reach as many people with the gospel of Jesus Christ as possible. If that means that I dress up in a Big Bird costume and that'll bring people to Jesus, I'll do it. If it means that our church meets at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'll do that. We're not going to do that. But what I'm saying is this is going to give us an opportunity. I think as a church, we're entering a new season. This has been a great journey for us. We're 2 months now from our launch, and obviously before that we had been meeting before, but this is a time for us as a church to enter into a new season, to reach more people. This has been a great place for us. We love the Archery Center. It's worked out great for us, but we feel that this is definitely the place for us as we move forward to reach more people. It gives us more flexibility with time. It's a more intimate setting with the level that we're at right now, but it also gives us room to grow and expand as we continue to add more people. So I'm just super excited about that today, and so I'm glad for that. We're glad to be back. I know last weekend Pastor Michael and Pastor Don were down here, and I hope you guys were blessed by them. If you were not, get a chance to see them. We'll have that message up online later this week. You get a chance to watch that. It's just an incredible story of power of grace, and it's nice to be part of a Celebrate family. We're a family of churches. We have churches all over that are planting, and there's some that have planted and are going to be planting. So when we get a chance to, Elaine and I, the boys get a chance to go away, we have family that's going to come in and help us support each other. And I just think that's cool to kind of have extended family around to do that as well. So let's go ahead and we're going to do our time of offering. Where we're going to receive the offering. And as we always talk about, there's 3 ways that can do it. The first way is you can go online to our Yankton.church, click on the Give tab, and select the Yankton Church Plant. You can also text to give. The number is on the screen and on the front of your CFL as well. And the third way is you can give as we pass the plates and collect them as well. So let's go ahead and go to a time of prayer. And God, I am so grateful again. I think about this Memorial Day weekend where we're honoring those who have gone on before us and who have paid that ultimate price to have the freedom that we have here today, like we've already said, God. And we know that you know exactly what that's like, because you paid the ultimate price for us, and for us so we could have freedom in you, and we get to go to heaven. And not only that, Lord, but here on earth, our time here, may we use that to serve other people and to reach more people with the gospel that you provide, Lord. So I thank you so much for every person in this room. And as we close out here, let's go ahead and say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. single person, no matter who they are, wants their life to matter and to be significant. So we're going into this series called Legends of the Faith. And so every single person wants their life to matter and be significant. And if you're in this room, I'm going to assume that you also believe that God can play a huge part in that. And so what we're going to do throughout this series, we're going to look through the lives of 7 different people that we consider legends of the faith here in the Bible. And heroes, people, names you've probably been familiar with if you've been around the church a long time. But here's the problem, I think. I think as believers, we sometimes think that we don't have the same abilities that other people have. And we look at ability. As human beings, sometimes we look to ability. But God doesn't look to ability. God looks to obedience. So what we're going to do throughout this series, we're going to look at each one of these people, and not the abilities that they had, but the attributes that they showed and choices that they made that were made in faith because they believed in a God that can do big and mighty things. And I still believe in that God. I believe in the God who can do big and mighty things. So we're going to go through this series. It's going to be an 8-week series. This is a great time to invite people to come with you to church. Now, if this has been a place that has made an impact on you, and there are people in your life who don't currently have a church home, this is a great time to invite them to come. This series is going to be directed for those types of conversations. And the best part is, it's an 8-week series, so even if they can't come next week, that's okay. Come in a different week, because each week we're going to be talking about a different legend of the faith, and they're going to give them an opportunity to grow and learn more about that. So we definitely want to invite people to come and to be part of that. You do not want to miss that as well. So today we're going to wrap up our kind of a series we've been doing with our vision. We'll be talking about who we are as a church. And I just want to say something real quick. Sometimes I'm asked, like, how do we decide, like, what's the message going to be? What are the series going to be? I've had those questions before. And so I just wanted to take a moment before we get started here and kind of walk through something. Just so you know, we believe that the more planful that you are, the more God can move. And we believe that every single thing here, every single thing you see, everything I've talked about or on the screen, we've given a lot of attention and a lot of thought and a lot of detail into that because we believe that God's Spirit can move, but we believe that that's that important. So we try to put significance in that. So I say all that to say this. I actually have all of our series planned through the end of 2018. Starting next month, I'm going to start planning our series for 2019 as well. If you're interested or curious and want to see that, I'd let you see that, but I give one kind of disclaimer is the reason why we plan so far ahead is because God's Spirit can move. And God's Spirit can say, hey, instead of doing this, we're really going to do this. And so that can change with that, so I want you to know that. But the reason why I say that is because this Sunday, I actually had something different planned for this Sunday. And about a month ago, God did something in my heart. And he said, hey, we need to do this instead. And I'll walk you through in a second. If you look at your notes, the title of the message here is How to Deal with Disappointment. And I don't know if any of you have ever experienced disappointment. I'm sure you have. But I was experiencing a time of a disappointment in my life. And one of the things that I say is, I love church. I love what we do as church, but I think sometimes we miss what church actually is. We think church is a building. We've talked about that already. Just like our move to the next our new facility, it's not about a building. It's about a people. That's who we are. So why do we as a church? Why do I get up here? And why does every single week I give a message talking about God's word? Well, one thing we do is because I believe that that's biblical. But I also say I'm on a journey myself. I don't stand up here because I've got everything figured out and I'm here to impart my wisdom onto you. I'm walking through a journey just like everyone else. And actually, this message is very personal to me because what I do is I actually preach messages to myself. Now, that might sound kind of weird to you, but I was experiencing this moment and God brought me back to this message. And I didn't say it out loud to myself, that's weird. But I did read through it again, and it was powerful to me, and it connected with me with where I was at. And then God said something to me that I didn't like. He said, now you need to share this with the people. And I said, I don't really like you sometimes. And he said, I know, but I love you anyway, Jeff. And so I think those are kind of prayers that God honors, is when we're honest with him and we say, hey, so every week, I say all that to say this, I don't give a message every weekend. I try to live the message. If I'm not living the message in my own life, I'm just standing up here giving a speech and we're kind of wasting our time. So I just want you to hear that as we're going through this today. So if you got your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Exodus chapter 15. If you got your mobile devices, I highly recommend the YouVersion app. It's the Bible app. It's awesome. It's free, and it's a great way to learn the Bible. If you don't have the regular copy, that's fine too. Also, it is in your notes. We're going to be in Acts chapter 15. And today, like I said, we're going to be talking about dealing with disappointment. I remember there's a married couple. They were out shopping at the mall, and most of the afternoon, the husband and wife, all of the husbands in the room, hope you can feel my pain on that. The wife suddenly realized that her husband had disappeared and didn't know where he went to. So she was kind of somewhat irate. So she called his cell phone and was kind of a little bit snippy with him and said, "Where are you at?" And the husband said, "Well, darling, you remember that jewelry store where you saw that diamond necklace that you totally fell in love with? You know, I didn't have the money for it at the time, but I told you that someday I would make that, I would give that to you. Do you remember that day?" And of course she was a little embarrassed and she smiled and she said, "Well, of course, sweetheart, I remember that day." And then her husband said, "Well, that's great, because I'm in the bar right next to that store." Disappointment, right? Disappointment is what we can have. That might be a death sentence too as well. There's two reasons why we're disappointed. And the first reason is that we all have expectations. And we've talked about this before. Expectations aren't necessarily good or bad, they're just expectations, right? We all have expectations, and then we all have an experience, and there's a gap between those two things. For example, he told me he would be here at 5 o'clock. It's now 5:15, and I haven't even got a text from him, okay? Or we talked about how we're only going to spend this much money this month, and it's already the 10th of the month, and she's already spent this much money. Or my boss told me, this is where we're going to go, this is the hours that I'm going to have, and now he's asking me, or she's asking me to do this. We have an expectation that is set, and then we have our experience, and we have a gap between that. And what creates that gap between our expectation and our experience? It's the same problem that I have, the same problem that we all have. We live in a world full of broken and imperfect people. Do not look at the person sitting next to you, okay? Especially if you're married, don't look at them, all right? Your spouse is perfect. And I know they're thinking about you too anyway, so it's okay. We all have the same problem. We have expectations, and our experiences don't meet our expectations. Because people are imperfect, and they will let us down, and they will disappoint us. But hear this, and this is why this is so important, and I'm going to say this probably 3 more times because I don't want you to miss this. I think as a church, now I've only been doing this 2 months now, but I think, church, if we get this one thing right, I think as a church, we're going to be okay. How do we deal with disappointment? How do we deal with other people when there's that gap between what I expect and what I experience? What we put in that gap, I think, makes all the difference. And I think as followers of Jesus Christ, if you're in this room and you say, "I want to follow Jesus Christ and I want to live my life the way He tells me to," I think we're commanded to do this right. And if we don't get it right, that's why churches struggle. That's why the world looks at a church and says, "I don't want to have any part of that," because that's exactly how everyone else in the world reacts. But when we get this right as a church, friends, this is so attractive that there's not a building in Yankton big enough to hold the amount of people that Jesus Christ will bring here. If we get this one thing right. Because here's the thing. To be successful in life, you must work with people who will disappoint you. Okay? We will be disappointed. Now, when I get disappointed, there's 2 things that I want to do that are not good. Okay? And this is the first thing I want to do is I want to take it personal. Okay? They hurt me. I'm offended. What they did bothered me. I want to take it personal. And the second thing I want to do is I want to take it public. Look at what they did to me. I want to build a little crowd, justify how awesome I am and how much they stink. Now, we don't say that out loud, but that's what we're doing. Okay? Imperfect people will make imperfect choices that will cause us disappointment. And those are the worst 2 things we can do, because, friends, we're called to be the light of the world. Okay? And Martin Luther King had a quote, I love it. "Darkness doesn't drive out darkness, only light can do that." When someone disappoints us and we put them up on a cross and we crucify them, verbally to them, or even worse to other people, all that does is spread the darkness. We're called to be the light, friends. We're called to be the light of the world. So what we need to do when we experience that gap, how we respond is so important. So we're going to look at a passage in Exodus chapter 15, because I think this is a great example of this. And we're going to look at the children of Israel and the story of Moses. You guys remember Moses? He was in that video there we talked about. He's actually our first legend of the faith. I didn't plan that just kind of happened. I think it's cool. But if you've been in church, you probably heard the story of Moses. He went down to Egypt. The children of Israel were slaves down there. He went to, Charlton Heston went in and said, "Let my people go." Right? That wasn't Charlton Heston. That was Moses. But some people remember Charlton Heston, right? I hope, right? Anyway, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh said no, and there was the plagues, and then God moved and allowed the children of Israel to leave. got out of Egypt and they went to the Red Sea, and they were kind of pinned in by this great ocean, and Pharaoh changed his mind, and the army came out to chase the children of Israel, to recapture them. And remember what God did? Moses stood out, he took his staff, he hauled it over the water. The waters parted, and the whole nation of Israel crossed through on dry land, right? They got through that. Pharaoh's armies tried to chase them, and Moses withdrew his hand, and the water covered Pharaoh's army, and the children of Israel were free. You guys remember that story? You've heard that before? Okay. This happens right after that. This is a far less famous story, but I think it's super important, and we're going to look at that. We're in Exodus 15, verse 22. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went to the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled. Circle that in your notes or in your Bible. 3 days. We'll come back to that in a second. 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water because it was bitter. That is why the place is called Marah. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" See, the Israelites had a water problem. Okay? At the Red Sea, they had too much water. Water was in the way. They get to Marah, they go through 3 days of a desert without any water. They get to Marah, they finally find water, and it's bitter and they can't drink it. Their expectation is, we're a nation of a couple million people probably at this point, a little over 1 million people. We need water. Okay? There's no water. Moses, Mr. Leader, Mr. Guy who let us out here, where's our water at? And they were bitter about that. So here is three things. If you got your notes, I want to take these out. The first thing is that to remember that great success is often followed by great failure. Great success is often followed by great failure. Remember that 3 days. 3 days ago, these same people were standing at the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army, the best army in the nation, in the world at that point, was coming to kill them. God parted the water. They walked through. Remember all that? 3 days, 72 hours later, they're already complaining. They've already forgot about that. Now, if you read on in the verse, and this isn't in your notes, but you can read it for yourself when you go home tonight. I really want you to read this. It says in there, God did this to put them to the test. And what they found was they weren't quite ready for that test. Now, I want to say something to be very careful about that. God is a good God, okay? There's bad things that happen in this world. God doesn't cause bad things in this world. God is a good God. Now, there's sinful, broken people who make poor choices, and we live in a fallen and broken world where bad things happen. But I want to make this statement. Everything that happens comes across the desk of God, okay? God has everything that's come through, and I don't know why. Sometimes things happen, and I don't understand them. But I do have faith in what God says. Now, I'm going to say this. I say that to make this statement. Sometimes God will put us in small spaces, okay? Because small spaces can magnify our weaknesses and show us where we need to grow. Small spaces can magnify our weaknesses and show us where we need to grow. I have a friend who is a youth soccer coach, okay? So if you have ever seen little kids play any sports, it's absolutely hilarious, right? Because they don't know what they're doing. They're just out there goofing around. And he said, he made this statement. I love this. He said, everybody looks good in the open field. You give a kid a soccer ball, you give him a wide open field, man, the guy looks like an amazing soccer player. They're kicking around. They're doing a great job. And that's what they do to start off with. But then they do something very important. They bring all the little kids in, and they give them one ball, and they confine them to a little field. Okay? And as soon as you do that, you get to find out who the real soccer players are and who are the people like me who should be standing on the sideline, right? Okay? You see that because small spaces can magnify our weaknesses. Sometimes God will put you in a small space with another person because you have a weakness that you need to be exposed to. Or maybe they do too. And maybe they need somebody in a loving, godly way to expose that weakness for them and help them walk through that. And I think if we're honest with ourselves in our lives, every single one of us at some point has had someone in our life help us in that area, expose the weakness to us. Maybe it wasn't fun at the time. Maybe we didn't appreciate it very much. But when we look back on it now, we think, I really needed to hear that. That's an area where I needed to grow. Or, likewise, you can say that to somebody else, but doing it in a godly way. Okay, I already said that. We'll move on. The second thing. I've been gone for a week, guys. You gotta help. The second thing. Remember, great service is often followed by forgetfulness. Great service is often followed by forgetfulness. Verse 24 says, what are we going to drink? Man, again, I just go back to, they just left the Red Sea. God just did this amazing thing, and yet they've completely forgotten. And who are they blaming? They're not blaming God, they're blaming who? Moses, right? Moses, you're the leader. Moses, what are you going to do about this? What is your problem? To which, and again, I love Moses because he's a real person, and I think he had real emotions. And I think he would, like, if I had been Moses, I would have said, like, really? Come on. Did you see what happened 72 hours ago? Why are you complaining? I think we forget sometimes. We take people for granted. Let's just say that. We can take people for granted. I've heard a study that said, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She didn't have a work outside our house until I was about in high school. She started in-home daycare. So she took care of us. That was her job. If you are that, if you're a parent where you stay home with your kids and take care of them, I think that's awesome. Did you know that the average homemaker will make 35,000 meals and make 40,000 beds? And the thing is, most of that is done without any recognition at all. Okay? Sometimes great service is followed by great forgetfulness. We just had Mother's Day a couple weeks ago, right? And I got the privilege of having my mom here, and I got to honor her here because I'm so grateful for my mom, but there's plenty of times where I took that for granted and I forgot about that. And we have to remember that too. Sometimes great service is followed by great forgetfulness. So this is the question we need to ask ourselves, and you might want to write this down. Who have I taken for granted? Who have I taken for granted? There's times in my life, and I'll be honest with you, there's times in my life when I feel kind of taken for granted. Like, I feel like I'm not as appreciated as what I should be. I know that's selfish, but I'm sure that if we're being honest, we've all kind of felt that way. And I had a mentor in my life that taught me this, and I think it's just brilliant. He told me, every time you feel unappreciated, every time you feel like you're kind of taken for granted, take out a stack of thank you cards. And just start praying to God to put people on your heart, and then just write them a thank you card. Okay? Don't send them a text. That's too easy. Right? Get a handwritten note card from somebody with your name on it and a specific thing that you appreciate about them, because this is what he was trying to teach me. Every time you think you're not being appreciated, guess what? There's 5 people in your life that feel the exact same way about you. And I thought that was great. So I do that. And my wife can attest this. I have a stack of thank you cards that sit in my drawer. And sometimes I'll just pull them out and I'll just start writing people thank you notes. Because again, that handwritten note in your mailbox just means something to you. Think of how different your life would be if every day you came to your mailbox and you opened it up and there was a card in there from somebody and you said, hey, I just want to thank you for whatever it is you do. Would that make you feel appreciated? I think it would. I don't think we do that enough. I think we take people for granted. I think we need to make sure that we're always appreciating people, and it starts with me. So, with great service comes great forgetfulness. Here's some, when we talk about disappointment, we talk about that gap between what we experience and what we expect. We're going to talk about 3 don'ts to do with disappointment. And I made these real simple, and there's a reason for that, because I want you to remember these. Okay, here's the first don't. Don't curse it. Okay, don't curse it. That's a natural thing. We talked about that. Hey, I've taken it personally. I'm going to curse this, because here's the promise from God. This is in Romans 12. And this is such a powerful verse, but it's very convicting. It says, do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, thus saith the Lord. Every single action we do in life, whether good or bad, God will call into account. I know a family who had a family member who was murdered. And this is a terrible, terrible story, terrible situation for them. But they're so angry. And rightfully so. I'm not trying to downgrade that, because if somebody were to murder one of my family members, I would be angry about that too. And that's okay to be angry, so I'm not downgrading that. But one of the things that I really kind of bothered me a little bit is because they were so mad about this person getting away with it. And this person didn't get away with it. This person actually ended up being executed because of the crime that they committed. But where does that release happen? Okay, that's not for us, it's for God. Okay, and I say that to say this. God doesn't let anything get by him. Okay? We as people, we miss things. God doesn't miss anything. Now, Jesus' grace is available for everyone, okay? And God's desire is that everyone will be saved. But I'm telling you, if there's something in your life and a hurt and a pain that you've had, God has felt it, God has experienced it, and God will call that person into account. And hopefully it'll bring him to conviction, and it'll bring him to repentance. But if not, that there is punishment to come from that. So don't curse it, because let God deal with it. As a leader, at some point, you're going to have to absorb the pain. This is what I mean by that. At some point, you're going to have to understand that there's going to be a hurt, there's going to be a pain, there's going to be a disappointment that you're not going to be able to justify. That you're going to have to just absorb that. Now, does that mean that you're a doormat as a Christian? No, of course it doesn't. What I mean is, if you really want to push this and fight this and curse this, it's going to be worse than it is just to absorb it. So here's the next one. You don't curse it, you don't rehearse it. Okay? Job chapter 5 verse 2 says, resentment kills a fool. This is one I have to work on. This is probably the main one I have to work on, okay? Every time you review a hurt, it gets bigger, okay? And I do this all the time. If I get hurt, if I get disappointed, I'm a thinker, I'm a processor, so I sit there and I think about it. I think, okay, what happened? And every time I do that, it gets bigger, it gets bigger, it gets bigger, it gets bigger. Every time you rehearse it, it gets bigger. Don't rehearse it. And you can't ever be the victim of that, because that's what you're doing, is you're allowing that hurt and that pain to have a possession over you that it doesn't need to. Here's the third one. Don't nurse it. Okay? So you don't curse it, you don't rehearse it, and you don't nurse it. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 says, do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. Do not let the devil have a foothold. Our natural tendency, like I said before, is to do those two things. We want to take it personally. We want to take it in. But here's our human nature, my human nature, when somebody hurts me, is to withdraw from them and to step away from that, because I don't want to be hurt and maybe I'm frustrated. But what we need to do is we really need to push in. It can be awkward. It can be uncomfortable. But it's necessary. And I think, again, guys, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, this isn't optional. Okay? This is a command from God. If you see a brother or sister in sin, you need to go to them and you need to confront them about it. One-on-one first, and if that doesn't work, then you bring help. Does that make sense? You have to do that. You have to push in. I've heard it said too, on an egg, everything looks good on the outside, right? You have an egg, but as soon as you push in, it gets kind of messy. Okay? Let's be a church. Let's be a people that are okay to get kind of messy sometimes. Okay? Because we need to do that. We need to see that. We can't curse it. We don't want to nurse it, and you definitely don't want to rehearse it. You want to take care of it. You have to live with the expectation that you will be misunderstood. Okay? There will be times in your life that you will be misunderstood, and you just have to live with that. I have a hard time with that, and I struggle with this probably more than anything, because I know what we're doing is so important right now. And as your pastor, I want you to know that I try so hard to get it right. I do. I strive to get everything right. My conversations with people, my interactions with them. And there have been so many times, even just in the last 2 months, where I have failed. And it just kills me. I'm honest with you. It just kills me. But I have to live with that expectation that sometimes I don't always communicate things the way that they should be communicated. And I need to work on that. And here's the beauty that I love about our church right now, is there are people in this church who love me and who love all of you, and who love what we're doing enough to come to me and say, Jeff, this wasn't okay, and here's why. Now that hurts. That's not always fun, but I so appreciate that so much. And I have to do that, because that's what we need to do as a church. Here's what, I know social media is a big thing right now, and it really bothers me when Christians, people who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, they see something on social media that they don't agree with, and they go after somebody and start attacking them and go back at them. And maybe they're right. Like, what they say, I think, is fine. Like, I would agree with the statements sometimes that they make, but it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that to that person? Because here's what I'm going to say. You will never win your enemy to Jesus Christ. You will never win your enemy to Jesus Christ. And when you say things like that, and when you say hurtful and mean things to someone else, all you're doing is you're pushing them further away. And pushing them further away, not from you, but from a relationship with God. We need to make sure that we don't curse our enemies, but Jesus said, what did Jesus say? He said we need to pray for our enemies, right? Pray for people. Talk with them. Have conversations. Don't push them away. Push in. Would you agree that Jesus kind of had a bad experience, right? Jesus' expectation, his experience. A week before, the whole city was calling him Messiah and saying, you're our king and we're going to make you our king. And less than 6 days later, they're saying, crucify him. And all of his followers, even one of his 12, betrayed him. And all of them, except for one, deserted him in his time of need. Okay? Do you think Jesus had some disappointments in life? But it didn't stop him from doing what he's supposed to do. And it shouldn't stop us either. So those are the 3 don'ts. Here's the 2 do's. And we always want to focus more on the do's than the don'ts. Okay, so let's give some time to the do's. Here's the first one. Disperse it. Disperse it. Give it to God. Okay? As the great prophetess Elsa once said, let it go, let it go. Right? Disperse it. You got to let it go. The first thing that we should do when we experience a disappointment, and I mean this with all of my heart, we need to pray. Okay? And sometimes we have these views of prayer where it's like, oh, the Lord, if thou goodest, helpeth me. You know, I'm not trying to make fun of prayers, but what I'm saying is sometimes I think God wants those kind of honest, raw prayers. I think those are the prayers that God really honors. I'll say this. Maybe you've heard this before, where people say, I just need to vent sometimes, right? You get a disappointment, something happens. I just need to vent. I just need to get it out, okay? And here's what the problem with venting is. Now, I'm an emotional person, if you haven't figured that out. I'm a very emotional person. I'm up, down, I'm all over the place. And you're going to know how I'm feeling, just kind of, it's going to come out there. So what I need to do sometimes is I do need to vent. Because if I don't vent, it's going to come out in a negative way. But this is what I've learned, and this is life-changing, okay? I'm going to give you a quick story about this. You guys remember what a lightning rod is? Okay, I grew up on a farm. Okay? And all of our buildings had these lightning rods on top of them. And the reason for a lightning rod is if lightning's going to strike this building, it's going to hit the lightning rod first. It's going to disperse the energy of the lightning bolt and hopefully protect the building. Okay? This is the thing that I heard that was just life-changing. Let God be your lightning rod. Okay? When you feel the need to vent and you just need to get it out, let God be your lightning rod. If you're a journaler, write it down to God. Okay? If you're like me, I'm not a journaler. I'll be doing this, and I've been like yelling at God before. I've been frustrated. I've just been, God, I don't understand this. Okay? Those are the kind of prayers that God honors. If you ever read the book of Psalms, most of the book of Psalms was written by David, and most of that is David venting to God. Okay? And he says some pretty obscure, extreme things in there that you kind of read now, and you're like, wow, that's what he's doing. He's letting God be his lightning rod. He's taking all that energy and letting God deal with it. Because, friends, God can deal with it. He can handle it. And you know what happens every single time I do that? 2 things happen to me every single time I first take it to God. And I say, God, this is what happened to me. I'm so mad about it. This is what God says every time. 2 things. He says, wow, Jeff, you're right. That was totally unfair. I'm sorry that happened. You're right. They're completely wrong, and that's not okay. But there's a second thing. Is what they did to you bigger than what you did to me? Because you see, Jeff, you deserved hell. And I loved you, and I came down, and I didn't wait for you to get it right, Jeff. I came down, and I gave my son's life for you. Okay? And he was rejected and despised and all of those things. So just let me ask you a question, Jeff. Is what they did to you bigger than what you did to my son? And the answer is always no. And then when I go into that conversation with that person, I have a whole different perspective. If we would get that right, if we could figure out a way as a church to do that, oh, I'm telling you, this community would never be the same. Here's the second one. Let God reverse it. Let God reverse it. Notice I say, don't let me reverse it, because I'm always the one that wants to reverse it, right? But God will do that. Genesis chapter 50, I don't have time for this story, but it's a good one if you want to go back and read it. But this is the verse. The verse makes the most sense. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what's being done now, the saving of many lives. Let's go ahead and look at verse 25. It's in your notes, and it's on the screen as well. Look at what Moses did in this situation. Remember, the people are complaining to him. There's no water. What are we going to do, Moses? Moses cried out to the Lord. Who did he cry out to? The Lord. He cried out to God. And the Lord showed him a piece of wood. What? The Lord showed him a piece of wood. And he threw it in the water, and the water became fit to drink. What? This is one of the craziest miracles in the Bible, I think. Because, what does that mean? Okay? I'm going to make a statement, and I'll come back to it in a minute. God never does a miracle to show off. Okay? God doesn't need to show off. God is God. All right? If you've ever been to the Rocky Mountains or the Pacific Ocean, I've just seen both of them this last week. It's amazing. God doesn't need to show off. Whenever God does a miracle, he's trying to teach you something. Okay? And I'm going to tie these two miracles together, the two that involved Moses. Parting the Red Sea, he had his staff in his hand, right? If you don't know, Moses was a shepherd. Okay? So he had a shepherd's staff in his hand. Shepherd's staff represented three things. It represented his income. Okay? Because he was a shepherd. That's how he got his money. Okay? It was his identity. It's my job. How many times when you introduce yourself to somebody, I'm Jeff, I'm a pastor, right? It's your identity, who you are. It was his influence. Okay? He knew how to influence the sheep. He knew how to guide them. His income, his identity, his influence. Here's what God was telling Moses in both those situations. You got to take yourself and you got to lay it down. Because every time that you lay yourself down, every time you take your security, your identity, your income, and you lay it down, God will take it and he'll bring it to life. God took this stick that Moses found, and I don't think it was a staff, I think it was another stick, but for the point of the story, threw it down, just like his staff, and he said, let me do it, let me bring it to life, because God provided that, and the water was fit to drink, and he saved the people. But here's the third one, and I don't want you to miss this, because this is the key to everything we're talking about here. The third one is, remember, great shortnesses in life are often followed by fullness. Great shortness in life are often followed by great fullness. Exodus 15:27, it's on the screen and it's in your notes as well. They came to Elam, where there were 12 springs, 70 palm trees, and they camped there nearby the water. See, Mara wasn't the final destination. Moses knew that. Moses knew that Mara wasn't the final destination. Okay? And if you know anything about that geography in that area, it's not in the Bible, but Mara is about 5 miles from Elam. Mara was where they were at. It's where they had the bitter water. Okay? Elam was about 5 miles down the road, and there was all these things, 70 palm trees, 12 springs. They had plenty of water there. Okay? Great shortness in life is often followed by great fullness. But I'm going to tell you something. I don't want you to miss that. God didn't bring Elam to the people. God didn't bring Elam to the people. They had to get up, and they had to keep moving, and they had to go. 5 miles to us doesn't seem like a lot. Okay? And it's not. It's 5 miles. But when you're walking with everything you own, all of your family, all of your sheep, all of your animals, the whole nation moving 5 miles, it can take a while. Okay? And it seemed like it was miles and miles away, but it was 5 miles down the road, and God had it moving because Mara wasn't the destination. Okay? He knew that there was fullness coming. Here's why I'm saying all this. Sometimes we get so distracted by what we see right in front of our face that we forget what God has in store for us. We forget that this is the God that provides for us. And a lot of times, when you're in a place, and if you're here today, and you're in tomorrow, if you're stuck somewhere where you don't see, if you're in a point of disappointment, I'm going to tell you something that you will never forget. Just keep going. Don't stop. Just keep moving, because 5 miles down the road is a place where God wants you to be. You never want to feel your way into an action, okay? You always want to act your way into a feeling. Let me give you an example of this. When I first started going to a life group at Celebrate Church, I knew nobody in this group, and I called this random guy who I'd never met before. He led a life group, and I said, okay, I want to be part of this life group. It met at 6:30 in the morning, okay? Now, this might not mean much to you morning people, but for the rest of us, that's early. Okay? And at the time, I was working at a place where I got off at 10 o'clock at night. If you ever worked a late shift, when you get done at 10 o'clock, that doesn't mean you go to bed at 10 o'clock. You got to drive home. Usually I was hungry. I hadn't seen Elaine all day, so we'd probably sit and talk for a while. It was probably 11:30 midnight before I got to bed. 6:30 in the morning is early. Okay? I want to tell you something. Every single time that my alarm clock went off for me to get up to that life group, I had the exact same thought. I do not feel like going today. It never went away. I went to that life group for like 3 years, and I'm not kidding you. Every single time that alarm clock went off, I don't feel like going today. But I did. Because I didn't let my feelings be my guide. I acted. I took an action step. I knew no one. I was uncomfortable. It got better. Obviously, the more times I went, it got better. Getting to know the people. I still hated getting up early. But the point is, it changed my life. It changed everything about my life, and it's because that's what we need to do. We always need to act our way into a feeling. We can't let our feelings and our emotions guide us, and that's a lot of times what we do in disappointment. Mara is on the map, okay? You will have disappointments in this life. I can't stop that. It will happen. You have imperfect people around you that will disappoint you. That's going to happen. But I'm going to tell you this promise from God. Mara's on the map, but so is Elam. Don't stop. Keep going. Keep doing what you want to do. This is the last thing. I think it's interesting that God's solution to the water problem that the Israelites had both times, the disappointment that they had with Pharaoh coming after them and the water, was a stick, right? It was a piece of wood. There's another piece of wood that was God's solution to mankind, and it was on Calvary. And it was a tree that Jesus was crucified on. And he said, that's my final solution to end the disappointment in this world. We live in a world, we serve a God who has already won the victory, friends. Whatever you consider a disappointment in this life, and I've already said this, but it's worth repeating, it's not bigger than what Jesus did on the cross. He did that because he loved us, and he didn't want us to be separated from him. And if you haven't yet done that, I want you to take care of that today. I don't want anyone to leave this room today without having taken care of that and said, I'm gonna follow Jesus Christ. I want this for my life. But if you've already done that, friends, none of this stuff is optional. This is all a command from God. Okay? When we're disappointed, how we treat them, and I want to say it again, I think this is the key to being the church. When we're disappointed, how we respond, how we react to other people is going to either bring them closer to Christ or it's going to take them further away. Now, if you're here today and maybe you've done something and you need to make it right, you need to make it right today. We need to have that conversation. Press in. It might be uncomfortable, it might be awkward. That's okay. But this is what we're commanded to do. Don't curse it. Don't rehearse it. Don't nurse it. Do disperse it. Give it to God. Let him take all that pain, all that suffering. He can handle it. I'm sure whatever hurt you're feeling is justified. I know it is. But I also know that it's not bigger than what we did to Christ. And then we're going to let God reverse it. There's still a God in heaven that can part the seas. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in my own life, in my own marriage. I wasn't going to share this, but I'm going to share it. May 27th is a big day for our family. Because on 2009, May 27th was the day that Elaine and I restored our marriage together. We'd been separated for 6 months. And we got down on our knees in our basement, on our couch, and we both recommitted our lives to Christ. And we committed our marriage to each other. And God saw you guys. He didn't see us. He did. He loved us. But if he hadn't worked in that, and if we hadn't got through that, we wouldn't be here right now. And there's so many more that need to be reached with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Friends, if we get this right, man, this community will never be the same. Let's pray. And at the bottom of your notes, there's my action point. What is it for you? I feel like I say this a lot, but it's worth repeating. Every time I get to this point, I just think, man, I hope we do something with this. Don't just let this go. God, I pray that you would do work in our hearts, Lord, when we experience that disappointment, and it will happen. God, help us to take it to you. God, help us as a church to walk with each other. Help us to model that in our own lives, in our own families, at our jobs, Lord. Help us shine that light in the darkness, because that's the only thing that beats darkness, God. Hate doesn't do it. Retaliation doesn't do it. Revenge doesn't do it. Being bitter doesn't do it. It just makes your life miserable. And you set the example for us when you came down and you gave your life on a cross. God, I pray that we would do the same. I pray that you would do a work in each of our lives, Lord. I'm so grateful for that. And we ask this in the matchless name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. I love you guys. Thank you so much for allowing me to be your pastor. It's just a privilege to do. Next week, I'm excited for what's going to happen. I'll be up here if you guys need any prayer. We'll also have communion as you leave. Feel free to do that as well. God bless. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.
those colors.
Oh, that's cool.
Cool. He's very good.
Good.
Bye-bye. You give me bye?
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Have a nice weekend. Or the rest of the weekend. Okay, we're cleaned up. Yep. Somebody's a little bit long-winded today.
I gotta go.
You know what, I came out here during it, but she was still reading. So they do have a day for her. She said it's been mental health.
What's your boomerang work?
I'm supposed to go back and look at the comparisons.
I'll send it. How'd it go? Yeah, no, probably. The first two I might want to do that.
Whatever you do, don't make it let something.
Okay.
Either way.
Let's go first. These guys. Very wet.
Well, there's a lot of events that we have for little kids that
Oh, that was their kid.